Hello everyone, and thank you for clicking on another one of my videos. I am Screen Scene Guru, coming at you with a new documentary video on the new National Geographic doc on the Titanic. This is titled Titanic: The Digital Resurrection. You guys can check this out on Disney Plus if you are a Disney Plus subscriber. Also, I believe this is on Prime to rent, as well as the National Geographic official website. You guys can look this up. This was reported on in the news last week, I believe, so I'm just now catching up on it. I watched it. I thought it was a really good time. It's about an hour and 9 minutes, so not that long at all. Going into a bit of bio, I've got a bit of information pulled up right here that I'll go into. Using cutting-edge scanning technology and state-of-the-art CGI, a team of experts create the first high-resolution 3D digital twin of the Titanic wreck. Through groundbreaking immersive investigations, they uncover the ship's final moments, shedding light on the acts of heroism and cowardice aboard, and revealing the true story behind the sinking of the unsinkable ship. So I thought this was a very fascinating documentary for National Geographic to do. They went back to the Titanic, scanning it with all these different high-tech cameras, and they've been scanning the bottom of the seafloor because, of course, the luggage and different things that were pulled, ripped from the ship as it sunk. It's interesting to hear that the shipping companies and the different tax companies are trying to still make claims to different luggage and to what is all down there. Of course, trying to recover valuables to different lost family members. I thought that was very fascinating. They went into the story of how they originally believed that if the ship had taken on the iceberg head on and rammed it, that the ship could still stay afloat. It was designed to take on icebergs. They tried this in a mock simulation, and they believed that it would condense the ship by 50 feet, crushing a lot of the main forward cabins that would be housing for the crew of the ship and storage for the rich first class up above deck. They did this in a simulation, and they said that the ship would have stayed afloat. It would have kept its structural integrity, but a lot of the crew would have been killed in their bunks at night. So the captain chose not to do this. He chose instead to turn away from the iceberg, which they believe led to it being a real nail in the coffin for their situation. So I thought that was fascinating. Original investigations of the shipwreck back in the day estimated the tear in the ship, the gash, to be somewhere between 12 to 15 feet. Now, scanning with digital cameras, they can tell the tear was much larger. It was actually, in fact, 18 feet long, tearing into several different compartments of the ship that weren't meant to be opened, obviously, not just storage, but into several of the engine rooms as well. That's why they had to, call for shut doors. There's several accounts of people, survivors of the Titanic, that described the situation, the dire situation. So I thought that was interesting to hear. They mentioned that in Engine Room 2, 30-something engineers, basically the entire staff of the engineering, stayed behind in the bottom below deck of the ship to keep the lights on as long as they could, because they knew there was no chance for them to get any kind of rescue if the lights had gone out. They knew it would be a dead ship. So they sacrificed their lives to try to comfort everyone on board while they were trying to get people in lifeboats. Very interesting to hear about some of the millionaires on board of the ship. Were doing heroic acts. One of them tried to get all the women on board of the Titanic off onto lifeboats. He tried to make it his mission, try to save his soul, if you will, by saving his mistress, her handmaid. Then he even went below decks when they were locked up, he ordered men to unlock them, and he tried to gather as many women and children as he could to gather onto lifeboats. So I thought that was very fascinating. Um, some more interesting things they went into. A lot of people, there was speculation on whether or not the boat actually went up and broke in half. A lot of people back in the day, when the courts tried to determine how the accident happened, they tried to say it just sank into the ocean and it wasn't a catastrophic event like it was. Through simulations of the digital twin, they were able to show how it was taking on so much water at the front of the ship. The front began to dip into the ocean, causing the back, the stern, to raise up, and eventually it just was so much pressure built up on the front that the back, eventually 20% of the ship imploded or exploded, if you will, leading the front of the ship to go down, the back of the ship to go straight up, and then eventually come down. There are testimonies of this from survivors, seeing the ship crack, do a massive split, and then of course the back end bobbed up again and then came down, just like in the infamous movie of the James Cameron Titanic, starring, got it pulled up just so I remembered, Leonardo DiCaprio, and also starring Kate Winslet. So a lot of those events that Cameron referenced, now they actually know the historical relevance to. Not, of course, the Jack and Rose of it all, but a lot of the first-hand accounts of one of the officers shooting themselves on board deck. It was even documented in newspapers. Now they're saying that another officer witnessed that crewman gathering people onto lifeboats and then being swept off the deck by waves. So a little bit of honor was disposed back to the families of that name, just because a lot of accusations were made at that time, because Cameron put in there that one of the politicians dressed as a woman to get on board a boat. Well, they actually talk about how in the angst and anxiety of the situation, there were no women around when they were loading on one of the lifeboats, and one of the established wealthy men aboard the boat just took a seat and decided to save himself instead of going looking around for women to save. They knew that they had, I believe, paid off officers to arrive at a seat at a certain time. They mentioned at one end of the ship there were officers that allowed men to get on board. They didn't have a discrimination against only women and children. On one side of the ship, they allowed men to freely get on board of lifeboats. Of course, there weren't as many as they needed to be prepared. They weren't expecting this event to sink their ship, of course. But yeah, going into just some of my final thoughts, I thought it was really cool to hear all the different stories about people that saved so many countless lives, and then of course all the people that chose to stay. There was several accounts of predominant women that couldn't leave their families behind, or couldn't leave their children to the ship because they were designated as men. Young 17-year-olds were men, so they weren't allowed on certain lifeboats. So certain families couldn't bear being split apart, so they decided to stay on the ship. Fascinating to hear about the reports of them seeing masses, groups of people clinging onto the ship as it rose up and then it fell into the ocean. And they talk about it, it predominantly stayed on, the light stayed on until right at the end. I thought that was fascinating. The captain relieved all his officers from their posts when the situation was most dire and told them to seek, safe harbor wherever they could, even though they knew all the lifeboats had pretty much been casted out. I thought it was a really fascinating documentary, and they're still going into over the insurance claims of what happened 100 and some odd years later, that the insurance is still trying to claim that it was that captain's fault, that he shouldn't have turned away from the iceberg, he should have tried to hit it head on. I thought that was one of the most ridiculous claims I'd ever heard, but maybe it would have prevented a mass life casualty. I mean, who knows? We'll never know, given the events of history, what could have been different. But what do you guys think of this new documentary out? Have you guys watched it yet? Are you going to watch it? Definitely check it out on Disney Plus if you are a subscriber. I want to thank you all for clicking on one of my videos, and I want to make sure you guys know where to follow me on Instagram and on Threads. It's pretty much the same, Scene Screen Guru. And follow me for weekly updates on my channel. If you like the stuff I'm going into, make sure to leave a like, comment down below, share the video, subscribe for future content. But until next time, guys, bye bye. Have a good one. I thought this was a fascinating doc.